Here.
For present, we have a quorum.
At this time, please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I request Mr. Jim Hoover to lead us in the pledge.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in honoring our country? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you. This time we'll do the swearing in of the new planning commissioner.
You want to? Yes, thank you.
And you can just stand at the podium.
So let's go down.
I, Bill Ferris, Jr., do solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon I'm about to enter.
discharge upon the duties I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We have your sign right here for me.
Next item is approval of agenda. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Chairman Cox,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Rajaratnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Yates,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanders,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferris.
If I can interrupt right here, I wanted to make sure that the public's aware, because I wouldn't like anybody to not be aware of it that's here for that particular item, is SPR 1702, which is tract map, tentative tract map. It's actually a parcel map, I'm sorry, 12221, which is a property located on China Lake. The staff is going to ask that that be postponed to the next meeting. The reason for that is because the newspaper did not follow up with publishing the article as a public notice, and therefore the public was not notified of that. Unfortunately, the paper just blew it on that, and so we would ask that that be continued to the next meeting when we have an opportunity to have the posting done. With the paper, we did send out the 300-foot notices to the property owners associated with that, so we would ask that they understand, if they're here, that that be postponed until the next meeting, and it will be part of the publication as well. So I just want to make sure we did that, since we're doing roll call at this, agenda.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Approval of minutes, August 23rd, 2016 and January 24th, 2017.
I so move.
I would second with the revisions that there was a discussion and acknowledgement that SCE, and this is on SPR 17-4, where they acknowledged responsibility commitment from to the Planning Commission in 2014 to install pedestrian lights, 2 lights on Upjohn. And then also in the minutes, I did not find where it was written that Mr. Goodspeed agreed to extend the roadway on Chelsea on the addition for the health center. So I would like to make sure those are in our minutes, and then I second.
Those are both in the August minutes, correct?
No, I didn't find them in the minutes as printed in our.
Or they
in our-
should-
Referring to.
They should be in the minutes.
They should be in the minutes, correct.
Okay.
So I'm just asking that they be put in. The resolution is okay, but it wasn't in the minutes that I saw, so I just wanted to make sure that those were in the minutes. And then I second. Roll call.
Okay. Commissioner Cox,
Aye.
Vice Commissioner Rajaratnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Yates,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanders,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferris.
At this time, we are going to public comment. Public comments of items not on the agenda. Persons wishing to address the Planning Commission on matters that are within the Commissioner's jurisdiction and do not already appear on the agenda may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the Planning Commission may not take action on an item that does not appear on this agenda. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. Each speaker is asked to provide his or her name and address for the record. We will now open up public comment at 6:09.
Is this on? Do I need to turn it on?
No,
It's on.
You're on, Jim.
Good evening, Commissioners. I've passed out a handout here for your information. I realize that and I'm not asking for any comments back this evening. This is for heads up for something.
Sir, can you give your name and address, please?
Oh, sure. Sorry. Jim Fallgetter, 207 West Cobblestone Lane, Ridgecrest.
Thank you.
So, again, for your information, I've passed out a little packet of something that may be coming into your jurisdiction and may not, and it has to do with the Walmart project, which, as we know, is going absolutely great guns. It's a super thing for our city, and they're planning some other actions coming up here in the future having to do with their outlying lots. But one of the things that isn't happening, and I've made many attempts through various venues, contacting their lawyers, talking to their PR people, running things through the city, and you'll see a letter in here from the previous city council's decision to have the manager of the city write Walmart, and that has to do with reciprocal access to other parcels that set next to the new Walmart. Many of you will recall that one of the big sales points of us going through a referendum with, instead of a full environmental impact with the Walmart people, they requested it, is that they would get a fast track, and the fast track would involve a specific plan, which they specific commercial plan, if they in fact got the right number of signatures on the referendum. So there's a specific plan document that's out there. I've referenced it here, and it's on the letter. Part of it is addressed on the letter from Kurt Wilson in 2011. So from 2011, the city has been trying to, in various ways, encourage Walmart to acknowledge that they should be providing reciprocal access to adjacent lots, just like what you would find on the old Walmart, where roads went back and forth to the different property owners, so commerce was stimulated. One of the big sales points by Walmart when they came up here was that a super Walmart, and this is why you should vote yes and sign your name on the referendum, is that the super Walmart would act as a magnet store to bring other businesses here. And the whole idea was that the Ridgecrest commercial plan, which was, or that area was zoned commercial back 35 years ago. I've owned that property 35 years, was that hopefully a magnet store would come and it would draw new businesses, new tax revenues, obviously, to that area. So that's what this document brings to your attention. In case these actions come before your commission, I would ask you to please keep this in mind. I think it's pretty well documented here, and all we're asking is for Walmart to come forth and say, yea, verily, we recognize that reciprocal access is part of the agreement that we made with the city and the citizens, and we'd like that in writing, because I cannot get, Gary cannot get, Kurt Wilson could not get Walmart to come and say, yeah, we understand that. And as a final note, the reason for the timing on this is that Walmart is looking for a sign-off on on the fact that they have met all of the agreement, all the parts of the agreement of this for the commercial plan that authorized them, that they've done everything legal that they're supposed to. Ridgecrest, this is the way I understand it, the city can ask them to, not only ask them to do that, but can require them to do that. So it's a good time to, if you have to coach them to come forward, to say, hey, we don't want to come forward until you help us to realize the dream of this area. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I guess we'll do that later when I come before you on the agenda. Thank you.
I do have one question for you,
Yes.
Jim. Is in reading this and even back in some of the language, it says shall be permitted, but it doesn't say that it has to be permitted. So I'm wondering, is there a document that you're aware of that commits Walmart to something?
I read shall as you will.
That's like a
You
must.
shall.
Yeah.
You shall. You can.
Well, you shall be permitted means I can, but it doesn't mean I have
No,
to.
no, not them. Excuse me, the
Okay.
way I interpret this, obviously. And the reason it's there, I'm sure, is that the people that drafted that document wanted Walmart to understand that they shall permit. Otherwise, the whole thing is suboptimized. It doesn't become a Ridgecrest commercial plan. It becomes strictly a Walmart
Well, I can see the
plan.
benefit. I'm just wondering in the language from the
Yeah.
city.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you had a document where Walmart had committed that they would do it.
Well, I don't know that we have that, but I think we have Kurt Wilson's letter, which was authorized by a full city council, by the way, a vote 5-0 or 6, saying, hey, guys, this is in there. What's intended here is that you do permit this, and that's the reason the letter went. So,
Sure.
Again, maybe somebody else can tell us, if you went back to the attorney or something, if there is another document behind that, but it seems pretty clear, and it did to the previous council. And also, I was in front of this very commission on numerous occasions having to do with this in the past. But I can see where you could flip it back and forth, but that certainly wasn't the intention of anybody, that it would be a one-off. It was,
Sure.
They got up and said in front of all the citizens of the city that they are a magnet store. When they go in someplace, hey, the new stores want to come. So I want to develop this property. I want to go off and run hard for the city and obviously for the people I'm involved with to bring new business in, new retail business, more tax dollars, and make sure this dream happens out there instead of just one store.
I understand it's being looked at, but I just wondered that. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
think it's, so let's run home and look up the word shall.
Thank you, Mr. Falgater.
Thank you very much.
Next item is public hearings. TTM 7320 located on West Kendall Avenue in College Heights subdivision to subdivide a 26.92 acres parcel into single-family residences and receive approval for a phased site development plan to build 75 lots, 10,000 square feet minimum and 13,650 square feet maximum. Any comments from
Staff report.
staff report, please?
Yes, Commissioners, you have in front of you a staff report prepared for this particular agenda item. It represents a track map, 7320. It revolves around some E2 zoned properties, which are essentially estate type properties with larger residential lots of 10,000 or more. This particular project has been reviewed both by the Planning Department and the city's engineering department, and we have provided a variety of conditions which are identified in your staff report. It again consists of 26.92 acres of parcels that are zoned E2 land, which will be divided as proposed into 75 single-family lots and one sump lot. The single-family lots range in size from 10,000 to 13,000 square feet, a little over 13,000. The project is located, as was identified, the southeast corner of Kendall and Norma, and we anticipate it to be a phased project, which will be built on what we call APN 510-2002. The project is essentially zoned E2, which is, again, I mentioned to you, is existing, is estate lots with a minimum lot of 10,000. We have chosen, the staff had a decision to make relative to the environmental status. We based the environmental review based on the fact that this property is located with relative to the general plan and an urban reserve, and was identified as was done under the EIR done by the general plan. We determined that it would be a categorical exemption. We had a choice between a categorical exemption and doing it as a mitigated deck. Our concern, mitigated declaration, we're concerned with a mitigated declaration as it requires a notification to the state document, which takes an extra 30 days to 60 days for state review. We would like the developer to be able to produce the move forward. We're trying to compact, again, as we talked about, our planning process as much as possible. So we chose the categorical exemption process, again, based on the fact that it is within the general plan, categorized as urban renewal area, and that it was done during the EIR and resolved that. We also have a biota identifying that there was no animals running around the countryside that we didn't want there. The track is actually bordered by two existing tracks. We identified and we sent out not only a public notice, but a 300-foot notice to those property owners, and I hope that some of them are here today so they can ask their questions and be concerned relative to the siting of the project and where it's at. We do not at current have any, for those in the audience, have any plans, building plans, which would give us renderings to identify whether it's two-story, one-story, or what. We just we're identifying the zones. We have conditioned as one of the conditions that when the homes, the building plans are defined for the home, that the developer will come back to the Planning Commission with another site plan, essentially review for those with those individual renderings, so we know what they're actually placing on the lots. Let's see. This is an aerial again showing you the property. There are other housing to the west and north and of the project as well, that are not shown on this picture that exist. This is a map which shows you the proposed units and slope and drainage. One of the concerns this track faces is that all of the tracks previously done essentially to the north of it or above it do not have on-site drainage facilities, and therefore that water will flow to this track, and so this track has to handle the water flow from the other tracks above it. So that was a consideration that was considered by our engineering department and the developer during the process of defining on-site drainage. We'll be talking, I'm sure, about that a little bit more. And this is simply a show you the actual original parcel that's in question and the other tracks above it. And current conditions that we see, these are examples of the property that you see, where we have development on the one side and the south side drawing. This is actually a street that's coming through that is not fully developed off of what we would call College Heights area. Again, just pictures of some of the streets entering in and out of the development that exists right now. And again, the southwest corner looking west, just giving you pictures of, we're trying to give you pictures of what it looks like out there, if you have not been there. And the other corners of the property. So that's the staff report. We have the conditions. I'm glad to go through all of them for you, or you can freely read them, obviously. I don't propose reading them unless somebody has a desire to have me go through that process. But both planning and we have one condition that planning put in that I'd like to have the council consider removing, the staff put in after talking again to the state and going through this process of review, and that is item number 8 on the planning side or community development side that deals, well, it's actually California Fish and Game, condition number 8 under that. And it says prior to issuance of grading permit, an applicant shall secure a written authorization permitting from the development from the California Fish and Game. In talking about that, actually, California Fish and Game does not issue written permits, so it would be very difficult for them to achieve that. What we meant was that we wanted to make sure that that's a condition that was used prior when, frankly, we carried over from other projects that when Fish and Game used to come out and do site visits and so on. They're not doing that anymore, and so we recommend eliminating that because it's impossible to get the written condition approval. So we apologize for that. We'd ask you to consider removing that from our conditions.
All right, where, I remember reading that, but where exactly is that? I'm
It's
having a
item,
hard time.
it's item 8. It's under California Fish and Game.
Page 14.
It's page 14, correct.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
It's at the very end of the,
8, okay.
of your, it's part of the resolution, so I'd like to have that removed if possible. Staff would like to have that removed. That item removed. Other than that, that's my staff report, unless you have issues. We have both the developer representative here, and we have, of course, Lauren relative to our engineering department here to answer any of the questions you might have as well, and the public. And we have, I hope, some public comment as well.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Commissioners, I'd like to point out a very important aspect of this project, that this is a phased track map, a phased tentative map, and the conditions of approval, particularly the engineering conditions of approval, do not reflect phased development of improvements. In phased development of improvements for a map, it's very important that certain aspects be identified, such as circulation. Oftentimes, emergency vehicles, fire department will require 2 permanent streets, or I should say, all-weather accesses to a particular phase. Also, that the water system, water lines be looped throughout that particular phase, as well as there may be unique aspects to drainage to a particular phase that would be required to be constructed for that particular phase. So I think it's important that the commission include a condition that requires the developer to be responsible for engineering conditions relative to phase development for streets, drainage, grading, and the public improvements that may be necessary to support a phase development.
So, for example, if they're developing houses way over here, they have to have streets to get there first.
Exactly,
Is that-
yes. Then, and right now, the conditions of approval do not reflect that there is any requirements necessary for looking at that particular phase to condition it relative to unique engineering requirements to support that particular phase. So it's important to say to the developer that each phase must be conditioned relative to the engineering conditions that would support the development of the track. For instance, let's take the main access of Kendall. There may be a need for a particular phase, however that phase is configured, for the extension of Kendall beyond the limits of that particular phase to support drainage, to support circulation, whatever it might be. The same consideration would be for the drainage improvements in the sump. Let's say, however the phasing plan is developed, however it's configured, there may be the necessity to condition that particular phase to install certain storm drains or other streets or curbs and gutters to get that drainage over to some safe point of disposal, such as the sump. So there are unique aspects of drainage, grading, streets, etc., that is unique to phase development that would need to be identified as each phase is proposed.
Are you then suggesting additional language?
Yes,
specific
I'd
requirement?
suggest a language, a condition to be added that would require the developer to have engineering conditions relative to phase development to support the development regarding streets, drainage, grading, water supply, emergency vehicle circulation, something to identify that as he prepares his phased map and presents it to us, that we have the ability, he's notified and we have the ability to condition it effectively to support that development for any drainage issues that we feel necessary, any access issues we feel necessary, any grading, water supply, and so forth.
Commissioner comments, please.
I had a question, Lauren. In reading through this package, I could be wrong, but it appears to me there's only one way in and one way out, which is Kendall.
Well, right now, the Kendall extension does not exist. Kendall beyond, I believe it's Del Rosa, is unimproved. The land divisions to the south do exist, and there are a couple of roadways that are barricaded, but they would provide physical and legal access to the parcel.
Okay.
The,
So at the conclusion of all the phases, there will be more than one way in and one way out?
yes, there will be.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
But you see, since the developer is proposing a phased map, we don't know how those phases are going to lay out.
be all
The
tight,
Subdivision Map Act actually indicates that it's not necessary that a developer show his phases and how they may lay out. He's simply required to state that it's a phased development. And then he can elect to configure whatever lots and whatever blocks or roadways he wants to develop in phases. It's important, however, that we recognize that there may be unique environmental or engineering requirements to support a phased development, such as drainage and grading and how it might affect runoff from the property, grading,
So we have to,
access and so forth.
as a city, we have to sign off on each phase.
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly right. That it's important that he understand that in approving this tentative map as a phased tentative map, that we have the right to condition him effectively per each phase for those engineering conditions that we feel are necessary to support that phase of development.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Lauren, I see in the packet here that they're proposing a deep sump. My concern is in 2009, the general plan, when it was adopted, the Planning Commission insisted that new subdivisions provide a combination park sump. If you come down to policy OSC 7.99, adopted in general plan, page 7-22, the city shall require developers to include recreational assets in all new developments by incorporating shallow sumps, detention basins that could be used for retention purposes. Also OCS 7.11, or pocket parks. So they give options. I'm wondering why we're at this point, and it might be an answer for the developer, why we've decided a deep sump versus what has been asked for by previous planning commissions and is listed in the books as our general plan.
Commissioner, I'd have to say, very honestly, it was an oversight by staff. I am conscious of that requirement, however, in the general plan that it calls for recreational and open space uses for flood control facilities. However, at the time of this writing, we did not feel we had an adequate time to effectively condition this project. And I believe if you'll read in the preamble here that staff felt that there were still some unanswered questions, that we had not had an opportunity to go through the full process of discovery or to be able to accurately and adequately identify all conditions of approval as demonstrated by the phasing that the developer is now proposing. The original map that was presented was stated no phasing. And then late into the submittal, all of a sudden phasing showed up. Staff didn't have the opportunity to develop conditions relative to phasing. And so, therefore, the process of discovery and effectively conditioning a project, we simply, it was a matter of omission by not having an opportunity to fully discover all aspects of the project.
Well, as this goes forward, my concern, overall concern, is we required that of Mike Hare in his phase development up there of the Horton tract. And I think that it would be appropriate that the developer be held to the same standard, considering it's in the general plan. So from the developer, I'd like to hear your thoughts, because you're the engineer, correct?
That is correct. My name is Claude Allen Whitson. I'm from Cornerstone Engineering, representing the developer in this case. With regards to the sump, one of the engineering issues we are addressing in this project is we are taking drainage from the neighborhoods to the south of the project that are uphill. And if you saw from the pictures that were presented with the package, there's significant vegetation that grows along there, and that pretty much indicates there's a lot of nuisance water that's flowing down the hill onto the site. And it's our position that the sump that we are dedicating down there will end up serving not only this area, but will end up serving the areas to the south. And it's probably going to continuously have water in it at all times. And given the current situation with the drought, well, it's probably almost done now thanks to the rain, but still in any other years when you've got a park down there with that will be used also as a sump, this thing will always have water in it. And if you zero-scape it, that means it's just basically going to be a mud field half the time. It was our position also that, and when we do we size the sump to accommodate the storm requirements, that in the county, if we were doing this, it would probably be deep enough to require a fence and would probably end up being a nuisance or a hazard if we have to make it deep enough to accommodate the storm runoff. So you will end up with a sump that's probably going to be more than 1.5 to 2 feet deep to accommodate the storms. And it would frankly be a liability if it's that deep and you've got it filled up and it's open and it's a park.
I think if you go look at Pearson Park, it's at least that deep, and that's exactly what it is, a sump park. Mm-hmm. And so we've got them also in this valley. My concern is we don't really have anything as far as recreation when we look at south of Upjohn Park, for the citizens to participate in, and to have a dead hole in a subdivision or a group of subdivisions is a blight. And so I'm just giving you what my personal concern is the previous planning commission, when they did the master plan in 2009, said they were insistent that we do recreational shallow sumps. And so I think that's probably where my vote would be, and so I'm throwing that out to you. It may, I see it from a developer standpoint that it may involve a lot or two, versus just additional space, which would cut down maybe a building lot or something. But I represent the city, and I think it'd be a better thing for the neighborhood if that was going into a park for additional recreation, because the time we have major hydrological events are few. Now, yes, we've had a wet year this year, but that's very uncommon. So that's just my concern. So thank you, sir.
Just as a comment from my standpoint, when we looked at this, another issue we have is the park the sump would require a benefit assessment district as well to support the maintenance of it, because our Parks Department is not capable of or have the resources to do that. So it would require a benefit assessment.
Landscaping, lighting, and maintenance district.
No, it's a benefit assessment district. It's different, but that's okay.
It would require a special benefit assessment district for maintaining drainage facilities. Drainage facilities are not covered within lighting, landscaping, maintenance districts. We had to go through that with the Stephen Harris tracks adjoining the Horton tract.
The other concern we have is it's more a policy issue. We're going to talk about that coming up tonight, and that is the issue we have of the dichotomy between trying to save water that we were talking about earlier last meeting, and the desire of the city to be a leader in showing water conservation, and the city requiring new landscaping of builders and owners, which was the policy in 2009 when we didn't have the water problem, and is now. So we're still looking for a resolution. Staff's still looking for somewhat of a resolution on that issue as well, and so it's a problem with a couple of no good answers. But it is something we have to consider as well, because even Zeroscape takes water. Mm-hmm. So, and that's part of the consideration we're looking at from my side too. Just as they had a comment on that for you to consider.
Any other commissioner comments?
I have a few questions, if I may. So my questions are on the drainage as well. So my understanding, and I may have this wrong here, so educate me on this. The drainage requirements was not to collect or detain all the runoff or all the rainwater, but any additional rainwater due to the development. Is that
correct? Yeah,
okay.
The drainage law allows property to drain in its natural state, as so to speak, as God made it.
Yeah.
You are permitted whatever falls on your land in its native state that amount of drainage. And that drainage can be directed to the adjoiner exactly in the same fashion as God made it.
Okay.
Whenever you do improvements to your property, you change the characteristics of drainage by making it less permeable. You make impervious surfaces with streets and rooftops and concrete and so forth.
Right.
Now, that additional drainage has to be,
That has to be retained.
it has to be detained.
Or detained, yeah.
There's a
that's-
difference between retention, which captures all, versus detention means you're just taking that additional extra flow and you're detaining it.
Okay.
You're allowing it to wear off, so to speak, at its rate, which would normally be as God created it.
So I'm wondering if maybe the wording is just a little off on number 2, drainage of improvements. Item B says all on-site stormwater runoff up to a 10-year event shall be detained on-site. Is that, am I just misunderstanding the wording?
No, that's directly from our hydraulic design manual.
Okay.
For detaining flows. We detain versus retain. Retain
Oh, okay.
is capture,
That's
complete
where I was-
capture, versus detaining is you're just taking the excess and
Okay.
holding it back.
Okay, so
And
this
it's
is
still
that's-
allowing
that's worded fine.
runoff to occur.
Okay, so relative to the sump, then, I've got very mixed feelings regarding landscaping sumps, and I like the idea of multi-purposing, making them parks or a recreation, some sort of recreation area. But at the same time, I'm very conscious of the water situation as well, and I don't want to make. I mean, I guess I don't know how do we go about solving that problem, because I don't know what the answer is, and what do we do tonight relative to this? Does this? I'm looking through here, and the only thing I'm seeing is the drainage facility shall be designed with fencing, landscaping, and irrigation systems. Is there anything other than that
The
statement?
caveat I can use, and we're playing wordsmithing here a little bit, but is that it says when feasible. So I would argue right now, because of the when we do these,
Oh, you're saying add that statement?
in the general plan, it says when feasible, drainage units should be. It has that word feasible in it.
That's in the general plan.
That's in the general plan
Okay.
language. So I could theoretically argue that right now, if I were trying to make that argument, I could make an argument the other way, but I would say that that's because we're in the water shortage issue we're in, that it's not feasible today, but it should be in the future.
Sure.
So in other words, when we have our water, the GSA gets resolved and we know to some degree what we're going to be on water usage and have available, then we could reinstate that because it's now feasible because we have the water for it. But
Yeah,
I can argue
see
the
that.
other way too, to be honest, but that's the word I would hang my hat on to
My other
not do what the general plan says right now. if
Yeah.
you will.
My other thought, going the other direction, is this is College Heights, and typically people that live in College Heights are up there because they really enjoy the BLM land up there, and there's tons of recreation up in that area, and perhaps maybe a recreational sump isn't really needed in this area due to all the outdoor recreation that's around that area. So I can argue it both ways in my head, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Mr. Kulp, I have few questions. So at this time, we do not know which is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, right?
That's correct.
So,
We don't know the number of phases.
or which side is phase 1, which side is phase 2? Say,
Correct.
are they going to start on Kendall side or Reedy side? We
That has
don't know.
not been revealed, nor does the Subdivision Map Act require
Okay.
the developer to show his phasing, only to simply state that he intends on phasing his map.
And we don't know how many houses in phase 1, how many in phase 2.
No, we do
We
not.
don't know how to. And what is the time frame for completing this track? Is it
Well-
6 months, 1 year? I mean, what are they looking at?
Typically, the MAP Act requires 24 months with a provision for a one-year time extension. Now, the state has been adding assembly bills, which has been extending tentative maps. And since our economic downturn, there has been a series, I think 5 different assembly bills which have extended tentative maps to help support development and not allow maps to expire and to help keep the economy moving along, particularly in the construction trades. So, but the MAP Act initially has an initial 24-month approval period for a tentative map, and then an option for another one-year time extension after that. But that has to come with an application for that time extension before the commission.
I think we are giving 36 months here in this, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So you said 24 months initially?
Yes, 24 months initially. That's by the Subdivision Map Act, and then there's additional year that can be added, but by application to the Planning Commission for a time extension.
So my point is, so we are giving 36 months to start with.
24.
No, somewhere I read 36.
24
I think-
initially.
I think-
I'm sorry if I misspoke. There's 2 years. They give you 2 years initially.
So it
And then
says
an
36
additional
months
year
somewhere.
We based-
upon application.
Right, we're basically, but you're correct, the language in your presentation talks about 36, which is the full application, anticipating
So I think
if
we-
they get to 24, they're going to ask for, and there's no real way you can not accept it, so we can go either way. We could put 24 with the one year, but they're going to ask
So the
for it.
extension
And we
is
can't,
already
we can't deny the extension, so,
Well,
That's why it's in there that way.
You would have that ability to deny if there were some
Changes.
Circumstances that would arise, public health, safety, welfare. There could be condition with water or sewer treatment. So you would have the ability to deny at the application for that 1 year. The extension is not absolute. It still requires application and would require your consideration, and you have that option to deny if something should.
if you have valid reason for denial.
Exactly. If there's some circumstance which would warrant the denial, you are permitted to do so.
So, Mr. Parsons, do you think it would be prudent for us to put 24 instead of 36?
We can do that, sir. We don't have a problem with doing that. We can make that change if the planning commission likes to have it that way versus the 36. Yeah, that's fine. We have to wait for the applicant. We haven't had anybody ever turned down, but it could happen. So we could change that, modify that particular condition to 24 with a 1 year, 12-year extension potential, application potential. The other thing I wanted to point out is I have a suggested condition, if that works for the phasing, that I'd like to offer up to the Planning Commission's suggestion, and that is the language would read: the developer shall submit to the Public Works Department his phase map and shall be further conditioned by for each phase by the city engineer. So we have that in the future, so that as he puts in a phase, he has to be conditioned again. So they just add that one condition into the language, and I think would cover you on the phasing.
I have a question for you. Did you have all your questions?
That's my suggestion.
Just have one point. In the resolution, we need to change the tentative tract map number. If you go to section 1, you have 6908. It should be 7320.
I'm sorry. Okay, clarification on that one.
Page 9,
Thank you.
section 1, findings.
Okay. Oh, I see, yes. Carry over from the other map. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. I have no more questions.
Mr. Culp, I'm wondering, I'm wondering on the water retention, I mean, I'm looking here at Reedy Street. They showed pictures where these streets are ending, the elevation between existing tract and come back. Right there, elevation between existing tract and future development is significant. If we're asking them to retain enough water for a 10-year hydrological event, when I've seen the flash flood that's come off College Heights, through the desert, I'm not sure that's achievable to ask them for that kind of retention on a 10-year hydrological event, because they're also ending up with the excess from other developments that didn't have to put sumps in.
Yeah, there is some uncertainty, and what staff had proposed was on item 2C, that and item I, that a detailed hydrology study and hydraulic analysis for off-site drainage tributary to the site shall be prepared to try to reveal what the actual hydraulic loading might be under a storm event. That was also staff's concern. We're so close to the edge of development and an alluvial fan where drainage and high concentrations of rainfall can often just carve their own path to where you really don't know on a sheet flow condition where that flow might end up. And so the point here is to try to perform as much of a detailed study as you can to try to identify what might be possibly tributary to the site to truly define the improvements necessary to protect those new homes.
Okay. Well, I guess where I'm going with that is in the past with all of the developments, they're required to have retention capability for their development, not for everybody else's too. And so now we're including everybody else too, and for a 10-year hydrological event, I think is putting a big burden on this developer, isn't it?
It does require some oversizing to accommodate that which is tributary to a site that would require oversizing facilities. Oversizing facilities is not uncommon for tract development if there are certain impacts that may be necessary, such as let's say that we find that the tributary area is such that the amount of runoff exceeds the capacity of, let's say, Reed or those streets, which would require the developer to construct catch basins to capture that and convey it to some safe point of discharge. Well, that in itself is a requirement to do more than what is required for just his development. He's required to construct the facilities to protect his development, and that may require some oversizing of some storm drains, some retention basins, and so forth to protect his development.
So though it might be an undue burden, it's due in part because of the specific location.
Right. Yeah. If we find through the hydraulic analysis, through the hydrology study, that whatever might be tributary, let's say on some of those neighboring streets, that requires maybe capturing that flow to get it to some safe point of disposal, those elements are going to be revealed through the hydrology study. And he has to construct those improvements to protect his development.
So if I understand, sorry if I'm interrupting. If I understand, it's not necessary that he has to detain the water coming in that's tributary to his site, but if it's simply diverting the water or something, he's going to have to do that to protect his site.
Yeah, let's assume that we find that there's a heavy concentration of runoff on one of those tributary streets that exceeds the street carrying capacity of that street. It overtops the the curbs, it overtops the sidewalks. Well, it's going to be important to capture that before it damages maybe one of the lots or a home or whatever that it could impact.
But he doesn't
So-
necessarily have to detain it. I mean, so the sump isn't going to be sized large enough for his property and the property south of that, all the runoff from the property south of that.
Well,
the development. south of
we
that.
are suggesting that the detention facility do try to accommodate that which is tributary to the site. There's other aspects to this that is in drainage law, and that is when you develop your property and you have runoff from your property, and let's say it's native state, that amount, and you do improvements, you cannot redirect the drainage to an adjoiner, and you cannot concentrate or increase the drainage to that adjoiner. So by simply the nature of him developing his lots and capturing that flow, he is going to effectively be redirecting and concentrating flow on adjoiners if he doesn't collect it and try to retain it. So there is that aspect of drainage law that you simply have to watch out for your neighbor. You can't concentrate it, and you can't increase it on your neighbor. So just by the fact he is downstream and receives these tributary flows, he's responsible for those to make sure he does not concentrate to some point on an adjoiner, nor does he increase to an adjoiner.
I just noticed, I have one question, I'm sorry. On page 12, it says, prior to recordation of the final map, the Planning Commission shall receive a landscape plan and review and approve all perimeter landscaping. So does it have to come back to the Planning Commission again? The landscape
Yes,
plan?
there is a requirement that that landscaping plans do be reviewed by the Planning Commission.
Okay, I think earlier we were community development officer or somebody was doing, right?
Well, when in this case, we're having it come back to the Planning Commission. Generally, it could, we've had situations in the past where it either came back to the Planning Commission or it can come back to the Community Development Director for review. In this case, we just put the Planning Commission in. You could ask it to be either way if you'd prefer not to see it again. We can do it. Staff can do it. But I would recommend it come back, because the reason we put it in there is we've had this controversy again about water and landscaping and all this stuff, and staff's not real fun having great time deciding which way you guys are going to go this day. So,
I'd like to see it come back.
so
All right, thank you. So if no other commissioner comments,
Was Warren finished?
I'd like to hear from the engineer what considerations that you've made, because my concern is this 10-year hydrological event. One of the questions I was asking staff was whether or not we have, because we've got anybody that's lived here for any length of time understands that we have on a major hydrological event, we have water that comes off the top of the hill and comes north, ends up on the base. And so we don't have any catch basins or sumps or parks in some of these other developments, is whether or not any conversation has been made with the BLM to see whether or not we could actually put a catch basin to maybe solve some of the sins of the past, just off the property line, whether or not they would work with us. Has that ever been done?
Not to my knowledge. However, that is as an element of the drainage master plan. Is there are some sumps that are to be located at the headwaters of some of these major hydrologic units to try to keep that peak flow from entering the city all at once. So yes, the master plan does address sumps within the BLM lands.
And what have been your considerations in talking to your customer?
Well, sir, I've lived in the desert most of my life. I'm familiar with the situation where we've got flash floods and these events, and the problem basically becomes water hits the ground and in the desert can't be absorbed very quickly and has really no place to go. What we've done in the past in these situations is you end up with your goal ultimately is to keep that 10-year storm out of the lot, regardless of the tributary area that's contributing to the water. It's all going to end up in the street from the houses, and you really want to make sure that 10-year storm stays within the right of way. And what you end up doing, especially in these slopes, these streets that have slopes on them, is you end up putting in fairly long catch inlets. And the idea there is that water's moving pretty quick, and as it hits this long inlet, it's going to make a right turn and go down into that inlet. So you end up with not your standard 4-foot wide inlet, but you may end up with one that may be 10, 15 feet long in order to catch the water coming off those streets on those slopes. And then you put it into the pipe, take it down to the sump, and a good sump in a desert location is typically like we have here on the edge of the project. To where if it's a larger event, it's going to overflow that sump and go out onto the street. In this case, this next street to North Kendall, and then probably top over the crown of that street and spread out into the property to the north. The advantage you're going to have with the sump there is it's not going to get all concentrated at one point. That sump is going to have a fixed elevation across the top of it. Water will weir out over that. Probably flow down Kendall a little bit, but if it's going over top Kendall, it's not going to go all out in one point. It's going to weir like a weir action over the crown of that roadway and be distributed much better than it is now. Because you can see from our existing ground drainage, we basically have channels that come off the end of Brown Street, Reedley Street, and the development of this site and the installation of that sump is probably going to eliminate that channeling. And you're going to end up with more of a sheet flow coming off the site. Also, with the detention nature of the sump, the whole idea there is we're not going to hit our neighbors all at once with the flow. The water's going to back up into that sump. The rain event's going to pass, and the sump will slowly drain down and allow that water to meter out of there as a part of its design function.
How many phases are you planning here? 3?
Do not know at this time.
Okay, and do you think the developer would be opposed if we left it with the sump, that maybe in phase 2 or phase 3, doing a neighborhood shallow sump for some of your on-site, but for a major hydrological event, we channel everything to the sump? You think he would consider that?
We could ask him. I don't know what his reaction would be at this time.
Thank you, sir.
Any other commissioner comments? At this time, I'll open it up for public comment. Any public comments? Can you please step here, sir?
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. My name is David Goins. I live at 300 West Vanessa, and so my property backs up to this proposed development here. And maybe for some obvious reasons, I object, but I think it's a little bit late for that probably. So I would like to say that, you know, this property for 30 years now, the people that live on West Vanessa have been blessed with an iconic view of the Indian Wells Valley. And losing that view is of great concern to me. I just found out about this a week ago. I'm obviously way behind the curve, but some things I'd like to say based on a lot of what I've learned tonight is that I hope that these phases, I don't understand phase build-outs completely, but it sounds like sections. I hope they would be controlled, and so we don't wind up with another situation like we have running up and down College Heights Boulevard right now, where they built over 100 sites, and we've built out 25 of them so far, here 5 or 6 years later. Hate to see the this whole project get all bulldozed and leveled and everything, and then be 10 years in finishing all the housing, if it were to go that way. The other thing that I would like, and getting back to the view and where the property is located, is I don't know if you have any control over it, if it would be the builder, but at a minimum to keep two-story houses further down the hill so that the view might not be affected as much by those of us that have enjoyed that view for so long. Sure, the EIR was done at some point, but I took issue with the comment that there's no little critters running around out there. It's my backyard, and I know what's out there. There's lots of little critters. I don't think any of them protected or anything, but they're there. Hawks come and land on my back fence. I know I'm going to lose that if this goes forward. Things like that are of concern to me. But I understand progress also. My biggest concern is that when the development that's on College Heights that I mentioned just a minute ago, when it went under construction several years ago, I could feel the thumping of the compactors packing the earth down there at my property, which is over a quarter of a mile away. In the 10 years I've lived in my house, I've come to the awareness that that ground's not that stable. There are voids under some of my slabs that I can hear when I walk on, and so forth like that. And so when they bring a compactor into my backyard, so to speak, I'm really concerned about what will happen with my property. My stucco on my house could start cracking. The voids underneath it that I know are there already could become worse, and things like that. So I don't know if it's too late or not. I just hope these things can be taken under consideration as this goes forward, and that you'll take into consideration the group of citizens that have lived there for so long. I'm actually one of the newer people on the block at 10 years, and so I don't know where everybody else is. But if they realize, like I said, I figured this out late, but if they realize, we might have more response. I just hope you'll keep us in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I might mention, if I may, Chairman.
One public comment.
It's okay, I can wait.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Culp.
That was another element in our preamble in the engineering department's review, that the application was incomplete.
Yes.
The Subdivision Map Act, as well as the Ridgecrest Municipal Code, requires a soils investigation, and that was not submitted with the submittals. So I would not have anything to indicate to you of a soil condition that might warrant some special consideration.
Lauren, we will have an opportunity to have a soils test when the plans are presented as well, the building plans are presented as well.
Yes, but the issue is the Subdivision Map Act, as well as our municipal code, does require a soils report to be submitted with the tentative map.
Would you like to have that condition added?
Well, yes, if we're to proceed with the review of the tentative map, there should be something to indicate that there should be some discretion or some review of the soils map to see if there's some condition that needs to be addressed for the sake of constructing roadways, building foundations, and so forth.
Thank you, Mr. Culp. Mr. Hood.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the chance to speak. My name is James Hoover. I live at 408 West Vanessa. Thanks for my neighbors speaking tonight, also whom I haven't met yet, but I think a lot of us on Vanessa haven't met each other yet. I'm about a 30-year resident of the Valley. I just retired from 30 years with the base, and I own the second lot from the end there on Vanessa. I built the first house on the street about 29 years ago, and we picked that particular lot because of the aesthetics, because of the view and the quietness and the wildlife, and I'm sure some aspect of my property value is linked to the fact that I have enjoyed a 180-degree view of the valley for many years, and the charities in town locally have benefited from my brick oven pizza parties that enjoy the view of the valley. So I plan to continue doing those. But the aesthetics are important. As you heard my neighbor speak earlier, and I'm sure that the developer understands this benefit too of putting homes up there where they have some more view. In the past, the grade is so steep that all you need to do is look down Norma and look down Reedy, and you can see where the water goes, and it's dredging the desert at the base of those streets. There wasn't catch basins before. And the neighbors, all complain about the steepness of the lots, especially folks that are backed up to the fence of the folks to the south. So they have a steep drop that's very difficult to landscape, and then a flat space where their house is, and then, a street, and then the same deal going on. So with a little bit more thought as to the aesthetics and the hydrology, perhaps the developer could propose some breaks in the division to ease those water concerns from neighbor to neighbor, like we just heard about, if I'm making sense. And perhaps one of those breaks could follow such that we don't impact the aesthetics of and the property values of the folks further up the hill, like myself. I understand that the developer owns the property and has the right to develop it, and I'm just asking that the city consider, how there could be some aesthetic requirements that don't reduce our property values as much as they could be reduced. Some folks don't care about the view, and the wildlife, but I, for one, do and have enjoyed it. So the other concern I have is for traffic flow. Currently, College Heights Boulevard from Kendall to the north is pretty much the only way out of College Heights, unless you want to take a washboarded dirt road. So is there a requirement to either widen it or put in other traffic so that, South Norma and Kendall all doesn't bottleneck onto College Heights? How is the traffic management proposed with the addition of, 75 more dwellings there? Thank you. Oh, and also, sirs, may I suggest that the city require a phased improvement of streets and curbs to help manage the water so that the lots don't get dredged and become ugly with drainage, before the phase is actually done, so that the ability to handle the water flow is kind of preceded by actual housing going in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Hoover.
you.
Any other public comments?
So you're willing to entertain a motion?
Okay, at this time we will entertain a motion. Do I have a motion? There are a lot of changes though, so.
So I have a question for staff regarding a motion on this. It sounds like there's a lot of things that are still incomplete with this tentative track map. Is this ready to move forward right now?
I would suggest that we have for clarification, we have the secretary go through all of the changes in the conditions identified in the resolution and any options, so we have it clarified. But I believe we're in a position to move forward with it. The objective, again, we're trying to do is to condense the time frame for planning processing. And I just hate, because we only meeting once a month, if we were to continue this, it would go on to the end of March again. And here we are now, a 4-month, 5-month process to get a track map or anything done. And I'm not very happy about it. It's your choice, obviously, though. So.
Well, my understanding is he has to come back with each phase for approval anyway.
That's
So
a
we're
good
gonna have to take each phase and go through an approval. And he's heard some of the concerns of the citizens, as far as what he decides he wants to do. And that's where we would actually hear those, what he's proposing. Because I'm sure he would put CCNRs in, and we would have to see those CCNRs for building. And so I think with the revisions and the wording that Gary has given us, the correction that our chair tonight has given us would probably give us enough to approve this tentative, interesting word, tentative track map and let them proceed for phasing. So I move with those changes that we proceed.
With revisions.
With the revisions.
Do you have a second?
A second.
Do you want to have her read back the revisions and the
Yeah,
wording?
I was going to ask for that. That'd be helpful.
The first is item number 8 is no longer valid.
To eliminate number 8.
On the planning,
On page 14.
Yeah.
dealing with fishing game.
And then do you have this wording from Gary? You want to read it again, Gary?
Yes, this would probably be in the building, it would be in the public works section of it, and there'd be an additional item that says, the developer shall submit to the Public Works Department of the City of Ridgecrest his phase map and shall be further conditioned for each phase by the city engineer. So that would cover those issues you're talking about and so on.
And then your correction, Solomon?
On page 9, section 1 findings, change tentative track map to 7320.
Currently it says 6 something,
6900.
Yeah,
690.
instead of 6908.
just a,
And on the same page, section 2, conditional approval, change 36 months to 24 months, and change the date from February 28, 2020 to 2019.
Did we want to put the extension in there with the?
24 months.
It's
with-
already
that-
there,
with
I think. A written
24
request for
months.
an extension of time is received.
it's in there. It actually is
Okay.
in there.
So I move that we approve TTM 7320, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Ridgecrest to approve tentative track map 7320 APN 510-020-02, with the revisions as stated.
A second.
Commissioner Cox,
Aye.
Vice Commissioner Rajaratnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Yates,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanders,
Aye.
Commissioner Firth.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item, discussion and other action items. Staff presenting this water and landscape ordinances.
Yes.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lord. Yes, this is a continuing discussion we had last time, and this is this dichotomy we have currently issuing in which the city has, as we've noted, several landscape requirements in some of our planning codes. And at the same time, the city has a desire to be the leader, if you will, in water conservation within the valley. So it's to staff, it seems somewhat contradictory that we are requesting landscaping plans on landscaping and that sort of thing, and then we're turning around and saying, but we don't really want you to use any water. And so it's sort of a, where are we going? Right now, with the staff, I told you last time that when we had the last item, we had a site plan review. We actually didn't present to you a plan, requirements for landscaping that technically could be in the code or in the code in some ways. So we are somewhat in a violation of our own municipal code by doing that. But on the other hand, we have other requirements from council that say we want to conserve water. So we're looking, staff doesn't like being in the middle, and we'd like to have you be in the middle or somebody else be in the middle. So we're asking you to consider this item and give us some direction, or ask that we go to council direction, whatever you'd like, but we need to get some direction on how we go forward with our existing landscaping and water ordinances within the city, and whether this planning commission wants the staff to present these landscape ordinances for you when they appear within either any of the different options we have coming before us, whether it be site plan reviews or track maps or a lot of other things that we do that has that in it, that was mostly done, again, based on the general plan, based on 2009, in which we did not have this water crisis issue as is presented, and in terms of our current water tables and so on, and we'd like to know whether you want to go forward with the landscape ordinances. When we do require them, obviously, or have them, we're saying that they have to meet city code, and they have to meet the water department, and they have to use the plant list. But no matter how we condition that, you're still going to have water usage. So to a certain extent, and here we are saying, please go out and use water. And then we're saying, please don't use water. So we'd like some direction from you as to what you'd like the staff to do in terms of this particular area, and how you'd like us to interpret the code, or not ignore forgive me if I use the word ignore the code based on the feasibility again, that we are in a crisis mode. Or do you want us to carry this forward to the council and ask for their direction? I don't know, but the staff doesn't feel comfortable currently, because we're kind of disobeying municipal code in some regards, and we want to do that only if you your direction is to move that direction. So, or the council is. So that's where we are. I'd be glad to answer questions, but that bottom line, I can give you a lot more spiel, but that's essentially what it comes down to. Do we want to enforce our landscape ordinances at this point, or don't we?
Are we at a point where we actually need to totally change an ordinance, or can we look for some verbiage like we did just a minute ago? Because
that's what we're trying. That's what staff's relying.
Storms and everything could change. Oh, I'm sorry. Couldn't hear me.
That's what staff's relying on, is this issue about when feasible. But that language in the general plan is more directed towards water, the water retention thing. So it's not directed all the way across the board. So we do have some questions, or perhaps you want the council. We can go back to council and ask that question.
Oh yeah, we'd like to kick it up to the mayor.
Kick it up to her. She has no water issues to deal with at all right now. So. But
well, here's if I can put my input to the commission. I don't think we want a bland desert. I don't think we want something that just looks awful. We do have water conservation that we need to think about. I think that we should keep a landscaping requirement as required, but requires xeriscape and drought-tolerant plants. There is going to be some water consumption, but I cannot imagine. I look in my subdivision and some of the new subdivisions where they're using rock and plants and river rock and things like this. And some of these are extremely beautiful, and they're not using lots and lots of water. I would like to see a landscaping plan kept. I'd like to see it come to the commission for approval, and I'd like it to follow the lines of xera and drought tolerant as is stated in the approved plants and so on and so forth, so that we just don't have something that's bland, or a house that's sitting on dirt, or a commercial building that's just dirt. Because you're not going to pave it all, and so if it's just dirt, you don't have any kind of covering, you're going to end up with sand blowing.
What we're doing here is the staff's not recommending to an applicant they don't do landscaping. We're just not requiring them to do landscaping. There's the significant difference.
And it's about what type of landscape we're requiring them to do.
If we did, our particular process now is that they would be required to meet our city in terms of xeriscape in the water districts, plant selection, and all that's all the conditions we have in there for water conservation now. The real key thing is do we require a homeowner to, for example, a homeowner to put landscaping in, or a property owner to put landscaping in, or do we simply don't make the requirement, but if they do put it in, we're okay with it? You follow what I'm saying? There's no negative statement against it, other than they must meet, again, the standard water conservation requirements we have in both the city code and the water district's codes. So it's a matter of, do we want to have a requirement, or don't we want to have a requirement, and that kind of thing for landscaping.
Could we still have the requirement of landscaping, but do like an addendum to give different choices of the landscape as part of the requirement?
They're actually required under our current code to do xeriscape. There isn't, that's already been kind of restricted, and there's a plant list that the water district provides that they have to pick from. So that's pretty controlled right now, actually.
And I think the only time they're not required to do it on a new construction, Lauren, I think it's 600 square feet, or is it 300 square feet? Where they declare when pulling the permit that you're under, I'm thinking it's 600 square feet of front.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact square footage, but there is an exception for
Right.
Filing the report on the landscaping that's going to be.
Right, I think if it's over 600 square foot, then they have to put a landscaping plan in as far as their building permit. And I don't propose that every homeowner, every home come in, but I think on major developments, I think that we need to have something. I think the existing code that says if you have X amount of square feet, you have to put a plan in. And I think staff can look at that and see if it meets the requirement without having to come to the planning commission. But on major developments, I think we probably ought to look at their landscaping plans. Thank you.
So is it just a discussion?
Commissioner comments?
Commissioner comments?
I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've seen the water and landscaping ordinance, so I think it'd be worth a review, and if there are changes, then we make a recommendation for those changes and send those to the city council. But I think I'm with you, Warren. I don't want to require grass, and I don't know that I necessarily want to allow open, just bare dirt either.
No requirement.
Yeah. I think maybe I don't know. I have mixed feelings with the residential. I definitely don't want to see no requirement for commercial lots, but on a residential, if they don't want to landscape at all, I don't know. I'd have to think
But
about
right
that.
now, I believe it's 600 square feet. If they're under 600 square feet, they can do it whenever. But if they're over, because you have to sign an exemption to obtain your building permit. But if you're over that, you have to put in a landscaping plan. One of the other things that are to consider in this process that has actually come to infrastructure is the current code doesn't requirement, but the codes are going to require where they actually suggest or require a landscaping meter. Okay? Now, in some cases, they're making recommendation because your sewer assessment is based upon your water consumption. If you have a second meter for landscaping, then that water is not included in that assessment. But you're going to see some of those code changes. But right now, it's recommendation only. And so I think the staff would like some direction whether to just, do we just not require it, or do we require it as it is and bring them to the Planning Commission for us to see and approve, or just follow the xeriscape and drought tolerant at this point as the ordinance sits, or do you want to review the ordinance and see if you actually want to send it up to City Council?
See, my concern from a staff standpoint is if you ask for landscape plan, that means you're going to landscape. I mean, nobody's going to send me a blank piece of paper and say, there's my landscape plan. So the reality is they're going to have to then put landscaping in. So you're requiring some sort of landscaping by asking for a landscape plan, at least in my interpretation of that. But maybe you have a different way of looking at it. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yep.
Any other commissioner comments?
Any other commissioner comments?
I would like to see us at least keep some sort of requirement there. I agree with Warren that it would just be a bad idea to just say do whatever you want to do. So keeping something there is valuable.
Thank you.
Public.
Public comment, please.
Jim Folgetter. I would really hate it if somebody moved into and built a new house next to me and left it totally dirt. We can already see in our neighborhoods with the, the drought tolerant approaches that some people are going a lot more dirt than you really would like to see next door. So I would not do away with that hook, because there's all sorts of things people can do with xeriscaping, including almost total rock with some plants in it. So just some input.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What was your name and address again? I'm just teasing you.
So what is the direction for the staff?
I'd like to see the landscaping ordinance brought back for a review.
I agree.
Agree.
So you have a direction.
I'm sorry, can I get more clarification? When you mean review, do you mean you want to look at it again, or do you want staff to start including it in all your packages again?
I want to see it again and see if we need to make amendments to it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're going to work on the ordinance itself, or the ordinances relative to this itself?
Like a,
Right.
a,
And if
a
and if you'd like to
discussion
send that
slash
out
action.
sooner than later, then we can just kind of review it over time.
Yes, sir. Within 24 hours we'll have it done. We won't, but we'll try.
Okay, thank you.
So it'd be another item for a future agenda that would have the potential for recommendations.
Yes,
to the
we'll
city
try to
council.
get it on the next agenda because we have time to get that out. And we'll get out the ordinances that are affected by that, so you can take a look at them and have you some input for next time.
Okay, next item, Media and Art Committee.
Staff report.
Staff report, please.
Yes, this is again an item that the staff we're having some clarification issues. I'll leave it at that. We the position of the question here is I'm trying to word this properly. Difficult. The understanding of staff is that the original requirement that the council directed this body to be involved, planning commission to be involved in, is the median art relative to the 178 corridor of the China Lake project, and that it was to be specifically related to that project, and did not carry on to other streets. One of the ones that have been talked about is Drummond and Downs and other street medians. And that, so the project was specific to that, as opposed to the desire to have the Planning Commission act as the sort of the focal point for any other median art in any other of the medians in town. The major concern there is the first and primary purpose concern of the medians is traffic safety issues, which is streets-related department. And then followed by that is the next condition that we're concerned with on a staff level is, of course, parks in terms of maintaining what we have. And, of course, council has a concern about money, spending money. Certainly this body is not directed to spend money, so we have to limit that, obviously. There was an issue on Drummond that I'd like to point out that was Ridge Project was the example that was brought up that we have that expands that. The question is, when an applicant, a nonprofit, for example, in this case, who are trying to do something well, are excellent for our community, wants to do an improvement on the medians on Drummond. The question is, they don't have a real direct body to go to. The procedure that's being recommended right now by staff is that they would potentially go to infrastructure committee to get cleared on the street safety issue first, or that issue first, and then you could either go to parks or you could come back to this committee for the artistic and meeting the general plan and the condition, much like we're doing with the median art. So, but the other side of the argument, to be honest, is that this committee is responsible for median art in all the cities at the directive of the council. And that's the other side, and I'm sure you may have a better memory, because I was not at that time the secretary of the Planning Commission or the staff for the Planning Commission, so I don't have personal knowledge of this. I'm reading minutes and information. And some of you, I think, were involved on it at that point. So we're trying to get clarification. We don't have a project in mind. There's nothing pushing this. We just want to make sure that we clarify this and we go forward in the future. And I'm looking for what this plan. I mean, there's a couple of actions. Again, much like water, you could either go back to the council and ask for clarification on this particular issue and what the Planning Commission should or shouldn't be doing on this. Again, because it's, again, I'll be honest, it's a new council since then, and some of you are new to the Planning Commission since then, and that would probably be my suggestion or recommendation, is that we go back to the council and ask for direction as to what median art if it's a ad hoc for just China Lake 178 project, or do they want us to be involved in median art across the board in the city? So that's the reason staff's bringing it up. They'd like, again, clarification and direction. As we have a new planning commission, we have a new council, we'd like to get clarity going forward.
So let me give you a little bit of history as well as the public from my standpoint. And let me preface this by, and it's something that you don't have, this is in 2-3.103, Planning Commission. This is from the city ordinances. In 6, one of our duties and responsibilities is to investigate and recommend plans to the council for the improvement and or beautification of the city, including matters such as opening, strengthening, widening, closing parks on streets, improvement, development of public streets, development, improvement or development of public buildings, works, subdivisions, and land, and the supplementation or the changing of zoning regulation in districts. Now, that's just one of a list of things that we're supposed to do, but it does talk about the beautification in streets and so on and so forth. So I did a staff presentation to the City Council almost a year and a half ago, maybe closer to 2 years, when a recommendation was made to form a Median Art Committee. And the council gave direction that the medians to be looked at by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission then appointed the Median Art Committee to do the labor, the hard work, to look at projects such as the Ridge Project had proposed. They proposed one on Drummond. They proposed one on Norma. The concepts went through. Ridge Project dropped it. One of the concerns that some of the organizations in town had is when they come to the city, well, we've got to go to this committee and this committee, and nobody can make a decision, and it gets passed down. And so when we formed the Median Art Committee, it was made up of people from the museum, historical society, business people in the community, as well as 2 planning commissioners. Solomon and I were serving on the committee. When it was originally formed, the Median Art, it was strictly for the North China Lake Boulevard project. And we went through and started designing some of the formula by which the community could contribute to the city. It wasn't for the Median Art Committee to give their stamp and approval and then they just did it. because everything that was approved by the committee was then a recommendation that went to the Planning Commission. In that period of time, staff took the recommendation of the committee and sent it out to the police department, to Public Works, to everybody, Parks and Rec, to see if there was a problem with the proposed project. If there were no problems, and if there were problems, then that information was then presented in the staff report to the Planning Commission for recommendation. In some cases, now on the North China Lake Boulevard, we came to the City Council a number of times. One was because we had to be named as a special event. And Jim, you should remember this, because to be covered under our umbrella liability policy, which was required by Caltrans, we had to classify this as special event. So the entire 18 sites were classified as a special event. So there were times that the Planning Commission then had to go for approval from the City Council. But in most cases, the Planning Commission could approve a project without having to burden the City Council with additional items. Because that's under our charter, that's one of the things that we're supposed to deal with is beautification. We also got direction from the county department because of our reserves being where they were, if Jim will remember this, that they requested, because of our liability, that there was no art or structures to be put in any beautification projects at this time. So the recommendations that went back to the two that were being done by the Ridge Project was to design the, if you look at this picture here, how they've done this, they've put a design in that median. The recommendation from the Media and Art Committee was to do pavers and have knockouts just like this periodically, so that if at some point we wanted to do art, that we could do art. The direction that we were looking at for Drummond was China Lake's history. So this was a history of NAS, and the art that we were going to propose was in pursuant of the developments that have gone on the base. But the request from accounting and for liability purposes was not to put them in now. But if circumstances change, we had the ability. So we didn't want to have this concrete poured and then what, we're going to jackhammer or saw cut or whatever it is. So the recommendation as a format was, if you come and develop this, bring us a plan, but put these individual spots in there for future art, and bring us a plan. So at this point, nobody's brought us a plan, so staff is correct. You know, we don't have something that's burning our tail that we have to solve this issue. But that was the formula by which to have a project approved without having to burden the City Council with each and every project. But the council did direct the Planning Commission to be in charge of this. And we in turn commissioned, when we organized Media and Art Committee, to kind of do the hard work, the heavy lifting for that. So that's the history. As I understand it, Commissioner Rajaratnam can maybe clarify anything that I might have left out. But I would recommend that we go back to that formula, because I don't think staff needs to have that burden, because they're burdened enough. I think a committee should be able to look at it and make recommendations, and then staff can send that recommendation out to the different heads of department to see if they have a problem with that. Because one of the things is, especially with Parks and Rec, they look at maintenance. Well, every project that the Ridge Project has actually put in there is zero maintenance. It's concrete, a lot like this. And if you go look at Drummond, west of Norma, you'll see where they've actually put in some of that stuff, and it's virtually zero maintenance. And that's the idea, is to cut down on some of the maintenance, because it's the Ridge Project that's actually going out and doing most of the maintenance on this. The street department or the Parks and Rec do not have the budget or the manpower to be able to do it. So they've been proposing these kind of beautification but zero maintenance ideas. So that would be my additional staff report for your consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So if the council has given us direction to take care of all the medians, is that point clear or no?
No, it's not clear on staff's part. So that's why I'd say that. But that's certainly, and I was not here for historic, so I certainly wouldn't disagree with Mr. Martin Cox on that issue. But I do believe, sorry about that, I'm having heart palpitations. But from a formal staff position, we can't find any particular exact resolution to identifying this. Seems to be an ongoing conversation that happened, but no actual resolution we can find in the minutes or during the conversations on this. That
Can I
says
ask
what we're
Madam
doing.
Mayor to come to the podium?
If she would not mind.
I was going to.
So while you're walking up there, and I don't know what you have in store for us, my question as a commissioner would be, would you like this to come back as an agenda item to you to approve the Planning Commission to look at all beautification concerning medians within the city? And then does the Planning Commission have the authority to appoint a committee to do the heavy lifting?
I'm not sure why we need to go through it again, because that was what was done. Now, if it was done without resolution, I was involved in all the media and art committees, all the discussion that happened when we did that. I believe it came back to council. If you've all looked and can't find it, then I recall that as being what we did, because there are still 3 projects waiting to be created. Because you all weren't meeting, we couldn't do anything. Rusty and Tina Warren, the Marriott in Hampton, and the Swap Sheet are waiting for direction to be able to go and finish those projects that we had committed to. And one of the problems that we had was trying to get direction from you all when we could begin that process.
Madam Mayor, you're talking about projects on China Lake Boulevard, are you not?
I am.
And that's not in question. I think the staff is very clear that China Lake Boulevard was given direction
Okay.
to complete this, yes.
Okay.
All the other medians we're having concern.
Okay, the other medians that we only discussed were those that were on Drummond. And we discussed that both in the Media and Art Committee, and I do not believe it came back to council as such. I want direction, but I think the direction should stay where it is. And why would we want to separate? Well, this median is your responsibility, and this is ours, and this is theirs. It's a Media and Art Committee. It doesn't say only. And if we need to clarify it, then let's clarify it. That is media and art. Whether the art be in the ground, low maintenance, nothing, that is just there to keep it so it doesn't have to be weeded all the time but still looks good, or if it be art, because we talked about that kind of art. We had projects that were described as potential in the Drummond area between Downs and Norma, and we thought there was a possibility to do some of those things that depicted our history, not just China Lake, not just the petroglyphs. Am I remembering it differently, commissioners?
That's exactly what I recall.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we talked about a number of different medians, because if you remember, Gary came to our committee and talked about the one on Norma south of Upjohn.
That's right.
And
You're right.
and so we went into a lot of them. Now, one of the concerns I have in that same number 6 that I read, investigate, recommend plans to cancel for improvement and or beautification of the city, which could be part of this, and it goes on. The question is, if you want clarification, is whether or not council wants to authorize this body to field that or come back with a presentation like we did on North China Lake Boulevard and council approve it?
I can't speak for all of council, but I can speak for myself. And I think the direction was given, especially since the city is not expending the funds to do this. These are people, individuals, businesses, organizations that are doing this and spending the dollars to make our city beautiful. So I don't necessarily think it has to come back to council unless we are expecting the city to expend those funds to create and/or keep the upkeep on those. Am I?
That was the direction that was
That
given
was the direction.
both by the city manager, city attorney, and council.
That's right.
That if it was donated and approved and it was at no expense to the city, and then the caveat came back and we were not extending liability at this point by putting up art, then that would be fine. So that's how I understood the direction and felt comfortable with it until this point. So
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
The fact of the matter is that at any time, the council can appeal anything that we do and override anything we do. So actually, there was one meeting where we got criticized on the council for allowing the planning commission to kind of do their own thing, so to speak, and particularly with regards to the Media and Art Committee, and we pretty much unanimously fired back and said, look, they're doing a good thing for the city. Let them do it. You know, it's something we don't have to worry about. And if there ever is some time where they're kind of overstepping their bounds, then we're going to call them back and appeal their decision. But there's absolutely no reason why the city council couldn't take that authority away from us at any time if they wanted to. So.
I think I got direction from the planning commission. There's another comment. It sounds pretty clear. So, thank you.
All right.
We'll continue forward as soon as we have a project.
Okay. Appointment to committees.
Yes.
So we have one opening at this point, Bill.
Parks Rec.
And what is it?
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec.
Quality of Life Committee.
Parks and Rec Committee, or essentially, it's not called that, but that's what it is. Okay.
Quality of life.
It's quality of life is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr.
Who's the other commissioner on it?
Sanders, Mr. Sanders.
Two on the end.
So I'm asking if you'd be willing to serve.
I will, yeah.
Okay, and the median art is
We meet on
Solomon and I.
the 7th. Is there next
So
meeting?
we can go down there, but we ought to probably pay attention to China Lake, at least on those three projects.
We only have one that's paid for anything, that's willing to build something. Until we have three that are willing to have a project that wants to build something, it's not economic, is what I'm told to do, the traffic control to do one at a time.
Right. Are the other two plans in? Have all the plans been done, Peggy?
The artists have not given them back.
I mean, okay, no, but I'm talking about the engineering, all the paperwork that Matthew put together to send to Caltrans.
Not for the two I know about. I can't speak about.
Okay,
the rest of you.
so Gary's right in the aspect that we need to have three in order to do the traffic mitigation, the control for traffic and that. So I would suggest, at least at this point, that the other two, if they work with their artist, the engineers, get the paperwork, because the formula's been put together and then submitted to staff.
We're waiting for Olaf Dow. He was very sick near the end of the year.
Yes, I remember that.
And so that's what we were waiting for him.
Okay. So long as we're not dragging our heels, and it doesn't sound like we are.
Yeah.
We do have a request that the commission consider, not necessarily have to create it tonight, but we have an item for council tomorrow night coming up, which is the creation of an economic development committee, which would include planning in it, by the way, as it's proposed now. And we would like to have you consider having some people in mind for that committee pretty quickly once, if the council chooses that committee, to create that committee. We have appointees for that, so we're not asking for formal we're kind of in the middle here. We're not asking for formal appointments at this point, but we'd like you to consider that, because we may ask you to come up with a couple of people for that committee if they create it pretty quickly.
Would that be in addition to the Bowman Business District?
The Bowman Business District we haven't talked to about, that's really been dissolved, so it doesn't
Okay.
really exist anymore.
Okay.
We didn't get enough support from
That
the
was,
local
that was
residents.
Scott and
Yeah.
So those commissioners
This,
would be
this,
willing
this
to
committee,
serve on that economic-
as I understand it, would have economic development, community development, and planning in it, are the three major areas.
Cecil, what are the two that you're on?
Water conservation and city org.
So Solomon, I'd recommend that maybe Jim and Bill, if that is formed, if they would be willing to serve on.
You're already on 3? There's more committees than there's what's on here.
Right. There's the third one is we
There's
haven't.
more committees, but we're not on all of them. Like,
Right.
we don't do the finance, we don't.
Sure.
The animal control, which
Which isn't really
Right.
around anymore.
only when there's an issue.
Right.
So will you both be willing to serve on Economic Development Committee?
I would, yes.
Yeah, I think that'd be fine. I'd be good with that.
I appreciate it. So if it's formed, we can place you guys on the
Thank
the
you.
committee, if it's formed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to Commissioner items, comments.
Commissioner item that we should have on the agenda is committee reports.
All right.
So, and that should be a regular thing for our secretary as committee reports. So why don't I start? And I serve on the Media and Art Committee, which we have not had a meeting. I also serve on the Infrastructure Committee. Most of our time was spent on a report by our city engineer and our city manager and Gary, dealing with the sewer plant, the contract with the Navy, location of the plant, time taking a contract, decisions to be made. Some assignments were given to our city manager to expedite a particular decision by our next meeting so that we could make a decision on which direction we're going. And what else? Lauren? What's that? Oh, the triangle, the parking lot where the theater is owned by the city. We've been working with the surrounding landowners that are actually using it. It's kind of headed up by Mike McGee to try and create, rather than city do an assessment district and the city do the work, which is prevailing wage, if they do kind of the maintenance with the approval of the city engineer, it keeps the cost way down, and all of the landowners are willing to participate with that in like kind for the amount of lots that they have in that subdivision. And so we're working on that, and the plan is coming forth. Anything else, Lauren?
Yeah, the grading ordinance.
Grading ordinance, we're in the middle of that. We did approve 1, 2, and 3, and there's an additional, I think, 8 things that we're looking at. The problem with the grading ordinance was the fact that there's some ambiguities in the ordinance. And so we're reviewing it and making a recommendation so that we can actually take it back to City Council for a resolution or a change in the ordinance, so that staff, at least at this point, the staff has some direction and they can move forward with the current builders and developers with the direction that we gave them. But ultimately, we want to revise and take care of the ambiguities in the city ordinance in relating to grading plans. So, anything else, Lauren, that you can remember?
Yeah, talking about commercial development plans and the time it took for McDonald's and the Harbor Freight.
Well, and that's a concern, and it's we finally got something through the county that allows Chris, one of the building inspectors, to inspect home plans if they're engineered, and we can get them back pretty quick. But on commercial plans, they're 3, 4, 5, 6 months with the county, And so with Harbor Freight, they chose to go with an outside source. So the city made that outside source available to them, which is a cost they paid, so that they could expedite their development, which at that point the county washes their hands, won't have any liability for it. There's been a number of considerations. So we've just had problems with getting plans approved. And I think that there's council members that are considering maybe some other alternatives. There are some alternatives, but at this point, that's just what we discussed in infrastructure. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Faris, do you want to say anything?
No, I got nothing. Thanks for having me.
Commissioner Sanders?
The Quality Life Committee will be meeting on the 7th of March. So as of right now, I don't know what's going to be on the agenda, but I'll give a report at the next meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Rates?
City org met earlier this month, and most of the meeting was dealing with discussion of the meeting policy.
City Council meeting. City Council meeting.
The City Council meeting policy, and it was there was a lot of ambiguity in there, so we had to kind of table it, and everybody's doing their homework and coming back with that. We had some interesting findings, so to speak, but that's pretty much what dominated our meeting. Can you remember anything else?
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
Justin wasn't there, so we didn't have any discussion on O'Neill Dynamics.
Right. That was about it.
Thanks, Commissioner Rates. I mean, since Commissioner Rates has already reported on City Org, I don't have anything to say. But I just want to welcome Commissioner Faris.
Thanks, sir.
And we love to have you. So hope you'll enjoy this. First day, first meeting is a long meeting for you. So enjoy.
You did that on purpose.
Okay, so we're moving on to comments, or was that our comments?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Everything.
So let me just make a couple of comments. One of them is on yours, Cecil, as you guys are discussing things for City Council. And so I would say it for this body too. I think there needs to be a certain amount of respect in chambers. We hear a lot of things in council and even here about the Constitution, well, not only of California, but the United States. Well, the First Amendment in the Constitution guarantees peaceful demonstration. Mm-hmm. So shouting, screaming, throwing chairs, sewing, and so forth is not peaceful demonstration. That ends at the door. I think that there should be a certain decorum in here because that's respect for everybody else who might have a different point of view or something else to represent. And when we represent the community, we need to listen to all points of view and not just to the loudest. And so that would be my recommendation, if that's one of the discussion items. So I want to thank staff as my comment. I'm appreciative of our young lady down here that is working hard with her fingers and saying, why is this taking so long? I'm grateful to our city engineer for the work that he does. I ask you a lot of questions and you have the answers, and I appreciate it. And I know Paul works in the background a lot, and I'm appreciative of his efforts. And I give Gary a really hard time, and he's not sure he likes me. In fact, in private, he says he doesn't. No, I'm just kidding.
He forgot your name.
Yeah, I forgot my name. I won't say who I was. Anyway, but I'm appreciative of him and the effort that he made. There's challenges with everything that we do, and everybody has a different point of view of things, and I'm appreciative of staff's willingness to listen to the 5 personalities that are up here and what we have to say and recommendations, and appreciative of that tolerance. So thank you to all of you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other commissioner comments? That's it. All right, staff items.
No, we appreciate you coming tonight and spending a short time with us. Relative, by the way, Mr. Ferris, this was a short meeting, not a long meeting, but that's beside the point. Those of us who've been here before know that.
Hey, I've conducted a few that are under an hour, so.
Because there was one item on the agenda?
No.
No, okay. But we do appreciate and look forward to working with you. My door is always open to you, sir, and you're welcome to come, as well as all of you. I'm always happy to answer questions and work with you to try to get the best possible service we can provide. To our goal in the department is to provide the best possible service we can to the community and the developers and the people we work with. And it is the state makes it difficult, as you know. The county makes it sometimes difficult for us, but we persevere, and we do that because we have you guys to work with. We appreciate that very much. So, and I will tell you, as was said before, and I say this almost every meeting, is I've got a staff that's really making a difference for us, and I appreciate their help, and they're happy to work with you as well. So thank you for being here tonight. And thanks to the public for showing up. Some of them.
Thank you. Okay, the meeting is adjourned at 8:07.